on this lovely Friday. It's the 14th day of May. We've got a great informative program today. Well, I should say May is Building Safety Month, which brings awareness to, building stronger, safer, resilient communities. And Michael Dice will speak to that later on in the program. May is also Historic Preservation Month, and Nina will talk about that a little bit later on in the program. I wanted to make mention of something the city manager mentioned at the Tuesday council meeting. Next, in the first council meeting in June, the public will be allowed into council chambers. The occupancy will be limited to about 30%, and that's a little over 50 people, but that's a good start of kind of getting back to the normalization of the way things were, right? The same will apply to the Planning Commission. And as you all know, when we first started our task force meetings, we met at City Hall on the 6th floor in a large conference room. Unfortunately, that room is under renovation, and when it's complete, council will move to that room on the 6th floor, and council chambers will be undergoing renovations too. So therefore, it'll be we can't use the 6th floor. So we are currently looking for a venue where we can convene and kind of get back to face-to-face meetings. I think that was very productive. We enjoyed it, the exchange, being together. So. We are searching for a place, and we'll hopefully at the next meeting we'll have some recommendations so that we too can get back to some form of normalcy. So with that being said, let's get started. Nina will kick us off with land development.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Nina Nixon-Mendez, Assistant Director. We're going to start off with a report by Andrew on our staffing and also on some planning process updates.
Thanks, Nina. This is Andrew Demas, also with Development Services. So to start with, as you'll see on the screen, we have currently filled one senior planner position, and we are interviewing for the second senior planner position next week. So that is all going forward. We'll see ahead. Second, we did complete the hiring process for a new planning technician. Her name is Serdapal Registre, and she's going to start on June the 1st. So that she's going to start contributing to the planning process, which adds another staff person to expedite plats just that much quicker. Now, onto the planning process, House Bill 4447, if you have not heard of it, it should be on your radar. This drastically affects the planning process, especially the 30-day shot clock. Now, it's a 5-page, in the last revision, 5-6 pages of changes to the original House bill that passed last legislative cycle establishing the 30-day clock. But what it essentially does is it eliminates to a degree the completeness check. So documents that are today formally required as part of a completeness check, things like stormwater quality management plans, utility plans, traffic impact analysis, those are no longer by statute, or I should say by this bill, no longer allowed as a means of completeness, meaning you do not have to turn these in to get a completeness check. But which sounds great at face value, the downside of it is it directly affects the quality of submittals, meaning if a submittal is turned into us and is not quite complete or may not have the right information or is poorly submitted, that is now potentially just going to go directly to technical review committee and ultimately directly to planning commission, meaning there will no longer be these back and forth revisions of, move this line here, add this street there, add a cul-de-sac here. What is submitted will pretty much go straight to planning commission, resulting in either a decision of approval or a decision of denial. The second part of this House bill also addresses potentially a bifurcated process for reviewing those planning documents, meaning at the same time, we could be reviewing the stormwater quality management plan, we could be reviewing traffic impact analysis or utility plans, but that is on a 60-day time frame, meaning your plat could go to planning commission, get approved, and at the same time, the planning documents are being reviewed, meaning if ultimately the planning documents find that there is a problem in drainage, that could affect your plat retroactively, meaning you will now have to go back, redo your plat to match your approved planning documents. That essentially adds more time. So that's something I don't think the legislation has quite thought out yet. It's still on the House floor for vote. It has not been voted on as of this morning, but and of course it still has to go through the Senate and committee. The second part of that, what we have is listing of refining the UDC. That is where we have in the UDC today the option of a master preliminary plat, meaning this is a plat that kicks off the entire process for a whole subdivision, meaning something the size of King's Crossing or London Town or King's Landing, where you're starting off with 900 homes. That master preliminary plat essentially will let us just establish the base, meaning rough utility layout, the street layout, the rough density. It will not have to be as detailed as some of the preliminary plats we're seeing today. And it will work in a step down fashion, meaning you start with your master preliminary, you then go into a preliminary for, let's say, one of the units of this master development. That again does not have to have the details some of the preliminaries we're seeing today. Ultimately, the idea is the final plat will be just that, a final check. As long as it matches the preliminary and as long as it matches the master preliminary, that speeds up our TRC review, meaning the TRC has already looked at it twice for a master preliminary and a preliminary. Therefore, the final is more, I wouldn't go as far as to say administrative, but it's a quicker time frame in which we can review that. So that is why we call it refining the UDC. We have a chance to re-implement some of these chapters and verses that we have in UDC today that we've kind of gotten away from and just focusing on preliminary and final, and reinstituting a process that we think will speed things up and will help us with that submittal time. Are there any specific questions related to House Bill 4447 or refining the process for the UDC today? Okay, so hearing none, I'm going to pass back to Mina to talk about Historic Preservation Month.
Thank you. May is National Historic Preservation Month, and this is celebrated across the United States. And we are celebrating in our own Corpus Christi fashion. We're going to have a proclamation on May 18th, and the proclamation will, of course, be by our mayor, and will proclaim the benefits of historic preservation to our community. Of course, there are benefits where historic preservation encourages heritage tourism, it improves our economy, it addresses the rehabilitation of our existing infrastructure, building infrastructure through historic rehabilitation. And of course, historic preservation provides a wonderful sense of place and a cultural identity to our community. On May 20th at 4:30, our Landmark Commission will host its annual awards ceremony, and that will be broadcast on Facebook and CCTV as well. The next item is related to our trust fund balance. As of today, the balance is $1,772,578. We did have an item, River Ridge Unit 4, which is for wastewater and lift station, that was approved. The first reading was approved by council this week, and will go for a second reading. Now that project, the reimbursement would be $2,041,201.17. There's also a credit of $19,000 and change being provided to that project, a lot acreage credit. And so essentially this brings our trust fund balance to zero. And in addition, there's $268,700.39 that will also need to be encumbered from future revenues. Once that future revenue is satisfied, then we can continue to encumber the trust fund. We think it'll take maybe a couple of months for this to be satisfied. Any questions on the trust fund? All right, then going on to city participation. So our available balance of the combined bond monies is $2,406,184.65. And there are two projects that are pending that we're looking at in the process: Royal Oak Future Units and Calicote Estates Unit 5. And we hope to be concluding our reviews of both of those projects shortly and making a determination with respect to city council. Any questions related to city participation? All right, thank you. All right, and so we'll turn it over to Brett, who's going to be addressing stormwater runoff today.
Yeah. Good morning, Brett Flint, Engineer 5 at Development Services. Last month we talked a little bit about stormwater runoff and looking around your properties to see what is happening. And a good point was raised. The point was raised that there is a state water law that may play into this. So let's talk about the state water law. Let me preface this by saying I'm not a lawyer, although I do play one at work sometimes. But I have looked into the water code. We do have a lawyer on the line, but can jump in and correct me if I get too far off the beaten track here. But there is a state water law. That's the State of Texas Water Code, and you can see all the different drill downs there. Paragraph A and B of this law, this is section 11.086 of the Texas Water Code. It states that no person may divert or impound the natural flow of surface waters in this state or permit the diversion or impounding by him to continue in a manner that damages the property of another by the overflow of the water diverted or impounded. And that a person whose property is injured by an overflow of water caused by an unlawful diversion or impounding has remedied the law and inequity and may recover damages occasioned by the overflow. Basically, that says if I divert water and that runs onto your property and causes damage, you have to be forced against it. So let's take a little bit closer look at this. Stormwater runoff law, the statute does not specifically prohibit the diversion or impoundment of surface water, only diversion or impoundment in a manner that causes damage. So the general interpretation, section 11.086, is that a landowner is obligated to receive the amount of water that flowed over his land when the land was in the natural state, which essentially means the lower landowner cannot impound water that would result from flow in the natural state in a manner that damages a higher estate, and likewise, a higher estate cannot divert water that would occur in a natural state in a way that changes the course, concentrates the flow, or otherwise causes damages to a lower estate. Now, like any law, the real issue is how do the courts interpret this statute? And there's a couple of legal issues that come up when you start looking at how the case law on this matter. First of all, the statute does not contain a definition of what surface water is. So the Texas courts have historically applied a common law definition that states that surface water is water that is diffused over the ground from falling rains or melting snows, and it continues to be such until it reaches some bed or channel in which the water is accustomed to flow. Once water enters a defined channel, and there's a pretty broad range of definitions of what a channel is in law, as in court cases, it's no longer surface water. Technically, once it's in a channel, those waters are owned by the state of Texas. Technically, and there are cases that support this, if water runs into a channel and it exits that channel again, it's not surface water again, it's flood water. It's defined differently and handled differently in the federal courts. So the next question that comes up when you look at the courts is, what is natural flow? Well, the general interpretation by the court has been that this is the flow of water on the land prior to any change by the hand of man. Okay. Next slide. I'll speak up. Okay, I'll speak up. Now, in urban areas, there's more issues with this because developed areas, the general interpretation of this law is problematic because the land has probably been altered by the hand of man multiple times before an incident of diversion or impoundment results in a damage claim. And so even in, areas around here, if the land has been cultivated for crops, if it has been ranched so that there's been fences put up or vegetation has been removed or vegetation has been added, the courts typically define that as having been altered by the hand of man. So in an urban area, the direct application of state law can be very problematic because it's almost impossible to determine what the natural flow of water was under those conditions. So the Texas courts have adopted, for the most part, a modified rule. This comes from what's called the Restatement of Torts. This is a collection of authoritative statements that define common law as it seems to be applied in the legal system throughout the country. So this is actually like an encyclopedia of laws that lawyers and judges use. And this Texas courts have been using this statement from the Restatement of Torts in section 833, which defines that the flow of water is an obstruction, diversion, or alteration of what has theretofore been regarded as the natural or normal flow of surface waters in the particular place where the interference occurs. Thus, it is normal or natural flow of surface water at the time of diversion that should determine the rights of the parties in an urban area. So what does that all mean? That basically says that whatever the flow of water is, when you get there, the last guy in, you have to take a look at that, determine what is the normal flow of water on and around a property at the time of development. There's case law that supports the liability of a developer when the damage occurs to an adjacent previously developed property due to a change in the flow of surface waters. So in looking at this, now this part of the code does not address negligence on the part of an adjacent landowner that may result in property. There's other codes, there's other laws that typically are brought into play when that happens. There is fairly high standard, a legal bar proving that you have been damaged, and it is actually kind of falls under trespass codes when that happens. But so that negligence plays no part in this necessarily. So looking at stormwater in that regard, the city's codes, UDC, is consistent with the Supreme Court's interpretation of this law, that we do need to, as a community, we need to be looking at what is going on around our property with stormwater when we start to develop it. The idea is not to be draconian in applying a law, but to make sure that we're trying to keep everybody out of the courts by looking at what's going on with the surface water as we start a development. Any questions on stormwater?
That was very good.
Yes, there is a question.
Go ahead.
So the question is, apparently that this presentation was meant to show us that developers are going to be considered responsible. However, what do we do about it? There's been, I can see the presentation indicates that we're responsible, but what do we do about it considering it's someone else's property next door that has, let's say they've just, for instance, let's say they've just ignored their property over 30 years and they are running across our property. What are we supposed to do about it?
Well, I mean, this is, the presentation was just to state, this is what the law, this is how the law is interpreted. I think we all recognize that there are issues with, how do you approach somebody who owns property and try to figure out what's going on? I think the point is that, just like we've been saying, we need to at least look at that. And when you start a development, you need to be aware that that could be an issue. Now, this isn't how the city does anything. Again, this is how the courts have interpreted this law. So, as development services, we don't want to say, this is not to be draconian and say, hey, you have to do X, Y, and Z. It's as a development community, we need to be aware that this is an issue. And we need to work together to make sure that developers are not getting into trouble and homeowners are not having issues. And there's always going to be cases where something comes up and we're going to have to work through it. But the point is that it is a real issue. And, if there's an issue, like you say, if you think there's an issue that with the way a landowner has been managing their property, then that's something that needs to be looked at early on in the process, not after houses are built and people are starting to point fingers at each other and call their lawyer.
And while I appreciate that, that doesn't answer the question. The question is, what are we supposed to do? We are used to being exposed to liability for just about everything we do as a business in home building and land development. But what I'm trying to ask is development services going to stop us, create a problem for a plat if we have adequately managed the stormwater on our property? And let me make this clear. I cannot tell someone what to do with their adjacent property. I do not have the authority.
Right, Bart, but what I think he is saying is that before you put a shovel in the ground, that's the natural flow of the natural flow on your property, on the property you're proposing to develop. That's the time that you need to mitigate whatever flows into your property, whether or not the guy did or did not manage his property or whatever. It's at that point that you mitigate or handle, or whatever term you want to use. You have to handle the flow that comes onto your property, plus ensuring that your development pushes it to the appropriately approved discharge point.
Can I ask a question?
Sure. And I'd like to follow up too. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's to follow up with your point, Bart. So, and I'm trying to understand what Luke was saying here, but he's mentioned something about when man touches it. What was the natural flow compared to when it was altered by man? The first person flowing that in that direction was an alteration by the developer. Then the second person making it flow that direction incorrectly was then the builder. Or it could be the lack of maintenance by the homeowner. So whether they've had that property for a day or 45 years, it was still incorrect or naturally became incorrect over time, because if something's sloping incorrectly for a certain amount of time, it's only going to get worse. It's never going to reverse course and create a positive slope from a negative slope. I mean, you're only going to keep washing out negatively. But especially if you have no vegetation, and y'all have pointed that out to us many times in our building inspections. So my question, I guess, is, and towards Bart's question, as a land developer, you want us to go look at everybody's backyard, or you want us to look at what you approved as a city and what they should have on the ground on their home now? I mean, I'd use the same example of, hey, you approved this house to be here, but the guy then put a shed in his backyard and didn't get a permit for it. He altered it by man, created the water to go backwards. Now there's something behind him, and the guy who got the backwards water after the alteration has to come alleviate his problem.
Well, like I say, anytime you walk through the doors of a courthouse with any law, there is no black and white. There is no definitive. It has to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. What I'm saying, what I see in case law regarding this particular code is that irregardless of what happened in the past, the courts are going to say, what is the flow of water at this point in time if somebody makes a complaint? But say that even the original code is not, it's designed to be a complaint. It's implemented by complaint. I mean, you don't have water police going around saying, well, hey, you put up a shed, you diverted the water, that's illegal. It has to, the law.
But you have code enforcement that should be catching all of the non-permitted.
That's true, but that's, it's a big city and we don't have.
And the reality of
And
that.
the reality of that is that, things happen and we do our best to try and catch those kinds of things. We're bringing code enforcement people on board to try and look at those things. Those are the kinds of things I think you as a developer, if you think there's an issue before you develop that land, so what we're saying is those things need to be brought to the forefront early on before we get to the point where we have people calling their lawyers and trying to throw stones at each other.
So, and let me just, I'm going to be a little sarcastic and serious at the same time. So if I buy a piece of property, you want my engineer to go to everybody's backyard, then I can call my council members, y'all, code enforcement, and say, hey guys, he's doing something wrong. Before I start turning dirt, I want him to fix his problem. Because at that point, it's not my problem because I'm not developing. I'm just an individual landowner now concerned about my property flooding because he did something illegal on his property. Will y'all mitigate that at that time before, so we don't have to mitigate something when we actually bring a document and an $896 plat check to start platting?
No, Moses, you're still, I think you're a little bit off point, and let me explain to you. When you go in the example you just mentioned, when you go to develop a piece of property, you don't have to check everyone's backyard. You just have to know what flows onto that property. And whatever flows onto that property, you are now responsible to mitigate. That's it.
So then yeah, Bart's question was right. I mean, basically we have to solve the drainage issues that anybody and everybody create because we own the property adjacent to it.
That's an interesting way of stating it, but yes.
Yes, that's basically how the courts have interpreted this law. And there are some of the cases that I read through that went on appeal to the Supreme Court or to an appellate court where those types of issues were raised. Well, hey, this guy did something that changed the flow of the natural water. Well, the courts say, how do you know that he changed the flow of the natural water? What was the natural flow on that land before you got there? And that's the point in urban areas is the law, the Texas law as written has really no application because we cannot determine what the natural flow of water was on that land before it was altered. So the courts are now saying, once that land is altered, whether it was legal or illegal under city code, you now have what they interpret as the normal flow of water, which says if it comes onto your property, you need to manage it so that it doesn't damage somebody below you. And that's not the city, that's the courts that are interpreting it that way.
I got two following questions and I'll be quiet. So when you're saying the courts, was this a home, like a 50 home development blocking one house out of 10 houses on a street, or was this something larger? Because this doesn't sound right to me as far as courts, because then every person in Corpus can sue everybody because then the guy who built a little walkway on his side yard, who put a little bit more water on his neighbor's side yard, technically can sue him because he did that. And and I'm just throwing out different examples, right? And then I guess my second question would be, ultimately, when it comes down to this, and you just said the courts can't prove which direction the water went, I thought that's why we have plats that are recorded that show all of the topographical surveying information. And I thought that was what then was inputted into the city's GIS plan. Because like when my engineer looks at a piece of property, that's the first thing he does. He looks at all of the recorded maps that show their topo and their flow of water. So those theoretical houses, we won't point to a particular house, but we'll say a customer altered his home or didn't maintain his home. But when he purchased his home, he had natural flow to the street. Now it's backwards. Well, the court can't see that the natural lot grade of lot in block 6 and 6 was to the street, but now because there's a house there and there's a swimming pool and there's a jumping trampoline thing in the corner, he has some natural erosion. He started going backwards in an area. Like, I mean, are we really talking about the same court subjects here? Or are we talking about, I mean, one seems very minuscule, one seems very dramatic, because every property in Corpus is altered with a pool, then causes drainage issues to the neighbor. I mean, then I would think this is going to be a lawsuit everybody in Corpus deals with, and I'm just asking because it doesn't make sense that my engineer does all this work and does all his topos and finds all the drainage and naturally flows everything in the right direction. And there could be 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 10 homes on a block. And then, your comment is put it on us. Okay. Us means we have to start putting drainage systems in the back of lots. I mean, who's going to maintain that? Is the city going to take on that infrastructure as they do on the front of the lots? Or is that then going to be a privately owned, maintained drainage system for the one guy who had a problem that then doesn't want to maintain it because it actually costs him money? Do you see where all this is going?
I do, Moses. So let me answer this, and I'm going to ask Andrew to step in with respect to plats, right? Anytime a homeowner on a 4,500 square foot lot or whatever that lot may be, anytime they do anything, they need to ensure that they don't impact the surrounding world around them. Just as if they were Moses MPM Homes who does anything, has to mitigate, so does a homeowner. So when they put a pool in or put a structure in or anything, they can't impact their neighbors on either side of them. That has always been the case, and it'll probably always remain the case. So in that point, if we put a pool in or we put a shed in or put a detached dwelling in or whatever, it all has to, the site should flow with all these new additions to the approved discharge point. Nothing ever changes that, right? Now, with respect to plats, I want to ask Andrew to jump in here because I'm not sure everything that you said is quite accurate, but Andrew, if you would.
Sure, not a problem. So Moses, when it comes to plat submittals, the plat itself does not have topos. It's the public improvements that have.
I meant that. I'm sorry. It was a construction. I mean, at some point we're giving you that information and you have that on your GSI. I didn't mean plats. I'm sorry. I meant the topo.
No worries.
The construction plans.
The point is though that the topos that are submitted with the construction documents are at the very micro level. What we have on the GIS system is more at the macro level, the overall change in elevation. It's not going to show that down to the inch difference. It will show roughly a couple of feet of difference, and we can estimate which way water is going to flow. The other half of that is typical with plat submissions. There used to be a requirement that we enforce pretty heavily, and we've gotten away from it because of the means of access. And what I say when I say that, I mean, a plat submittal is supposed to show a survey around the subject property of 25 feet. So it will essentially give the red flag that if drainage is going to go in a particular direction, how does it affect adjacent properties? The problem that we run into is that when surveyors will go out, if there are fences up or if there are issues with accessing the neighboring properties, or the neighbor simply says, I don't want you on my property, survey, that puts us in a bind because we didn't necessarily want to hold up a plat if a neighbor didn't want to give access for that 25-foot survey. So we're stuck in the middle either way of if we don't require it, it won't give us the information to know which way water is going to flow 100%. If we do require it and the neighbor doesn't want to get access, it holds up a plat. So I don't know, there's an easy answer other than we're taking an estimation based on that macro level topo survey to determine which way water is flowing or potentially negative impacting neighboring properties.
And Moses, this is a fairly cursory look at case law. What I did see is there are some landmark decisions that are easy to find. There's also plenty of literature out there to show that these cases go both directions all the time. There is really no settled law when it comes to this, and you're absolutely right. You know, in an area like Corpus, if people really wanted to, they could go sue each other all over the place because somebody moved a little bit of water one direction or another. But the standard that the court's going to look at, they're not even going to take the case unless you can show that there was damage. And what the courts, the modified rule is saying is maybe somebody did something that moved the water, but if nobody complained about it, it kind of becomes similar to the adverse possession, that flow of water becomes normal because nobody complained about it at that point. And it's not until somebody complains about it that anybody bothers to go look at the law. And that's really what's going on here. And say, oh, we're reasonable. And if somebody wants to go do some more research on this and come back with different information, we're open to it. This is just what we found. Now the issue was raised. We went and looked at what the courts have said about this law, and that's what we're presenting here. We recognize that there's issues with trying to figure out what's going on around you when you're trying to develop a property. And I think we as development services, we just want to raise that awareness so that we all work together on that to make sure we don't have these issues going down.
Well said.
And let me follow back up. I just want to be sure. My question is development services telling us by making this presentation that they are going to stop us from developing based upon some information that comes from some other place besides what our engineers provide?
Okay.
And what I'm trying to get at is there will not be a problem. Development services will not get a phone call until someone's yard floods. The 2 years before when our plat was sitting in front of you, there is more than likely not going to be any problem. It will come later. So that's what I'm asking. I understand the exposure and the liability, and it's part of this business. But what I'm trying to understand is what's development services going to require us to do. If awareness is what we're being required to do, that's great. That raising the level of awareness is always good. That's where I was trying to ask the question.
Bart, as always, the development services will work with the development community. We're not going to hold up a plat or anything, as you said. But keep in mind, right, the UDC requires this now. And we're just going to ask during the platting stage that the plat has all the information needed so that we can be informed and you can be informed as well. So we'll continue to work together as I think we have done and will continue to do.
Thank you very much. That it's great that we've got a proactive development services that brings to the attention of the industry, a new problem or the problem of the month or a new way to look at things. And I was just making sure that we can do all we can to make it easier for you guys to make it preventable, a problem preventable. Thank you very much, Al and Brett. Thank you. Appreciate the comments.
Right, and Bart and you and Moses know we personally went out and walked some areas where it looked like we development services probably didn't look at the right things or we missed some things, and I just want to make sure we can work together so that we don't do that in the future, because our topography is basically flat. So it's important that the developers as well as the regulatory group look at these areas and make sure that what we ultimately build, works for everyone, the community as well as the developers and us in the regulatory group. So anyway,
And I'd
Sorry.
like to just add to that too. So I agree with Bart on the side and with you guys on the side of being more cautious and more tentative. If there's something that, will help y'all, we just ask that you tell us well in advance, as you guys are telling us now. Do you want a little bit of a scope of an area? We'll always look at that because we don't want to create any type of issue. And I think, that speaks really for every developer in this area. So, we just want to be a part of all the discussions on how to solve a future problem.
very good. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate that. Great discussion. Can you imagine what it'll be like when we get back face to face? So anyway,
Yes, sir.
we're gonna-
Mr. Raymond, this is
Sure.
John Tomaz. Just what is the city's intent? In other words, are we, as a city, looking to get ahead of this and start looking for areas, or actually everything in that's going to be affected, and try to resolve these issues before we get there? Or is it going to be case by case as the development happens? Because a lot of times it's not even the property right next. It may be affected down the road, what developers are doing. So what is the intent of the city?
Yeah, because thank you, sir, for the question. Yeah, because when we talk about drainage, it's always affecting the downstream customer or citizen or property, right? So we're going to, it's not a case by case. We're just going to start looking at our plats, right, to ensure that they have taken into account the world around them and handling whatever comes onto their property and properly discharging it where there is an approved discharge point, right? That's something that I don't think we've did a good job of in the future, right? And that's why, for example, as we're pushing out Information Bulletin 8, which will be effective June 1st, and Michael will talk about more, but it's just us bringing awareness to the development community and letting them know, hey, look, we've got to be able to work better together, right? Because I think April was, I've never gotten more calls on drainage, and keep in mind, it only rained like once or twice in that month, but when we went to certain areas, I couldn't really believe what I saw, but we're going to get better at what we do. And we want to, like Moses and Bart were saying, I want to make you aware, hey, this is something we have to work together on, right? So we're not looking to stop development. We're not going to sit on a plat, as many may say, but we're going to make sure that you're aware that, hey, you have to account for this, and we have to acknowledge that you have before we move on with it. And really that's going to be our approach, working proactively with you guys so that, we can keep development going strong.
It's all about making, and anybody who's driven around Corpus Christi after a heavy rainstorm knows that this is a major issue. And it has been an issue, and going back and fixing the sins of the past, as it were, is always difficult. But we can, as we move forward and as the city continues to grow and develop, I think that we can work together as a developing unity to make a built environment that functions for the people who live there. And it's like Al says, we're not trying to hamper development. We're trying to enhance development so that we come up with a built environment that everybody enjoys. And we're going to try and do a little better job on our part of looking at those kinds of issues. What happens downstream? Do we have capacity in our stormwater? Where are we doing that? And I think it's just like I said, it's just a matter of we're trying to raise awareness, and that was your point. The point is, it's just awareness. So let's all be aware of that. Let's look at let's look at the issues early on and let's work together to solve those issues as we find them. And we're certainly open to suggestions. If the development community says, hey, we think this is something that'll work to help us down that path, let's talk about it.
Well, do we have a master plan that goes throughout the area and identifies trouble areas, low areas that we could put maybe detention ponds before the development occurs or the problem occurs?
We engaged a firm on March 4th, and part of what we engaged them with is to develop master plans. And one of the master plans they're going to develop is a storm water master plan for the city of Corpus Christi. So that is coming. It's not instantaneous. As you know, master plans are a public process as well. So I hope you participate in that. Well, we're going to push all of this out. Sometimes through these are monthly meetings, but that is something that is coming, Mr. Tomez. So keep an eye out for it.
Thank you, Mr. Raymond. Thank you.
Yeah, there is a master plan in place. It's got draft written on it, because it has never been formally accepted, but it is a good plan and there's a lot of work put into it. And, you know, it's accessible, it's on the website. So that's a good place to start is, you know, let's look at the master plan. And like Al said, we now have a firm that's going to take that plan, they're going to look at that plan and they're going to say, you know, is this adequate? Do we just finish this? Do we need to make changes? What do we need to do with, you know, not just stormwater, but with wastewater and water and like I say, again, looking at as Corpus Christi starts to grow, you know, from a small town, as it were, to a mid-size and even a large city, so that we're trying as a city to stay ahead of the needs so we don't box these problems in. So it's a process, and this is where you know, it's a 593 step process, and we're now on step 2. We started.
Hey Moses, you notice how they call him Mr. Tomez, and you and I are Moses and Bart?
Yes, well, it doesn't mean that we love him more.
I'm just old.
I've been called worse, so it's all good.
I do. Go on. I'm sorry.
I have one quick follow-up question, and it might sound a little bit dumb, but you know, I really think you guys do have a great plan of action, right? And you know, I don't know what the UDC is. I don't know what the law is, but I also do know that we do have a code enforcement group here. And I'm just curious, like, for example, you know, I've got a piece of property that I have to maintain and mow, right? Because of the 50-foot fire break, right? And the neighbors behind it use it as a dumpster. But then the guy who comes as a code enforcement wants to fine me because they used it as a dumpster, right? And I kind of see it in the same sense here with the water distribution portion of it. If there's something going on in a piece of property that we're adjacent to, do we have the right to call code enforcement to have them resolve any of that stuff? Because I know this whole neighborhood services thing that was just recreated and put together is supposed to be handling, you know, I guess neighborhood problems. Is that considered a neighborhood problem? I'm just throwing that out there. You know, we're talking resources, people, things that, you know, we'll all have to go through, but it's just the thought, like, if you see a shed back there and, you know, at the end of the day, nobody pulled a permit to put a shed back there and you have a slab on an easement, but there's no permit or whatever the permit rules are, can that be corrected? Or will the city request that to be corrected? Or is it just harder to deal with individual homeowners because that's just the way it is and it's easier to deal with us and that's just the way it is?
No, you should report that to neighborhood services. I don't personally like pushing people to other departments and saying that's not my job. But as you know, neighbor to neighbor issues, if you will, are complaint based, right? So code enforcement really works on someone calling and saying, hey, look at this crap that someone dumped in my yard or whatever it is, right? So you need to engage, and Yvette made a great suggestion that perhaps at one of our probably next meeting, we should have a representative here to kind of talk about their process and how do they engage, and really what do they do. So if that's okay, if you'll sit tight, we'll bring them here for our meeting in June.
Yeah, I'm just looking at what are they doing, like what is code enforcement's like, because on these like Facebook pages, right? And you'll get a thing that says, everybody be aware the traffic guy is out there putting tickets in the neighborhood because the cars are parked backwards, right? Well, you just mentioned earlier you don't have resources looking at people permitting things. I mean, what, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to get an idea of what people are, those individuals are like directed to do, like what's more important, what's their chain of command. If, and it goes back to, I've been called, code enforcement calls me all the time. You know, grass is 1 foot tall, code enforcement's out there, right? You know, but if a guy puts an illegal shed, does code enforcement have the right to go tell them anything? You know?
Well, and keep in mind, we don't, you know, no one knows that it's an illegal shed until someone does some work on it, or research, right? So, but yeah, code enforcement is not proactive. So someone always has to kind of initiate that to get them at your front door.
And Moses, this is Mike Dice. So we do have a lot of homeowners that come in with code enforcement paperwork that they have tagged them for an illegal carport, an illegal a shed, even if the shed is under the permit requirement, say it's too close to the fence, it sits in setback. So they do pursue those, but again, most of the stuff that's done here is complaint based. So absolutely, if you have an issue that is affecting your property or you're aware of, you can definitely call code, and they're going to be launching the new 311 here pretty quick as well. So that'll be a lot easier to make those complaints even on the phone or through a new app that's going to be launched.
And as I said, I'll try to get them here. I'm sorry, Moses. I'll try to get them here next at our next meeting, so that and give them a little section so that they can kind of, you know, talk about what they do, how they do it, and answer some of your questions.
Yeah, I just want to be, I mean, technically I'm a neighbor to every neighbor that's a neighbor to me, right? So
Understood.
if I see them doing something that could hinder our development in any shape or fashion, meaning, you know, affect their own drainage, then, you know, I want to know if I can call code enforcement, because we don't go develop everything tomorrow. But, you know, if a guy comes in tomorrow and, you know, I'm seeing he's putting in a swimming pool because he's using your property and took down the fence from the backside of your property and bringing concrete trucks through your property for the swimming pool. But I go, hey, dude, well, now your water's coming this way because your cool deck is this high. You blocked off your side yard. Who's going to maintain your drainage? I'd like to call it in then, you know, so that guy knows he needs to maintain it. I mean, it's not going to work in every case because some things have already been done. Some things are 10 years old, you know, 20 years old, whatever. But I'm just asking for future, because you guys brought up, you know, a perfect rule of law. You know, when man touches it, you know, it's been altered. So I'm just asking a dumb question that might lead to something beneficial. So.
No, understood, and we'll do our best to kind of address that going forward. So I appreciate the exchange. It's great. It's kind of refreshing, right? So if there's no more questions on stormwater, thank you very much, Brett. I think it was extremely informative. We'll move to building division, which is Mr. Dice. Take it away.
So again, the building division, May not only is Historic Preservation Month, it is also Building Safety Month. The ICC, the International Code Council, has been promoting Building Safety Month for the last 41 years. This was a picture of us. The mayor did a proclamation for Building Safety Month, promoting the 4 weeks that we will promote different avenues of safety. And as you can see in that picture, Bill, our senior plumbing inspector, is super happy about Building Safety Month. Next slide. So Building Safety Month, and actually each week and again, for the last 40 plus years, ICC has been doing this. Each week, we celebrate and focus on a particular issue. This year, the 41st year, we're running first week is energy and innovation. We're focusing on the efficiency and resilience of buildings through modern codes. Week 2 is the training the next generation. Again, this is about just training internal staff as well as external contractors and people who are considering becoming a trade professional or builders. We just want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to train and become the best that they can be. Week 3, we're focusing on water safety. And that not only is, the water production and treatment plants, it's actually how it hits your location through building and plumbing codes. They aid in the protection of your water supply at your building. So week 3 is promoting water safety. Last week, we're promoting disaster preparedness. Again, when states and municipalities adopt the latest codes, losses from disasters decrease about 25%. And with municipalities having the most current and up-to-date codes, those municipalities are more likely to receive and qualify for federal disaster funding. So we're just looking at all aspects of the built environment. And again, every May we'll be doing this going forward. So we hope you guys can either go to ICC's website. They have a lot of interactive materials. There's some webinars. There's actually 2 webinars today. So there's a lot of stuff out there that you guys can participate on. So the staffing, the building division, we have hired a new, check real quick, the new building inspector, Joseph. We've got an electrical inspector, Brandon, new permit technician, Mike Guerrero has been promoted to the chief plans examiner. We have a new plans examiner starting next week, I believe. And a customer service rep, she starts June. Oh, she just started, sorry. And then vacancies, we're still missing 1 plan reviewer. We have a building inspector posted that will bring us to 100% on building. We have an additional compliance inspector position to be filled that will bring us to 100% for compliance. We have 2 permit technicians still available, and we're actively pursuing some candidates for that. And then 1 electrical inspector, which will bring us up to 100% on that as well. So again, to update inspections, as you know, electrical has been behind. We are catching up with the addition of Brandon that's come on. Our inspectors are working 12 and 14-hour days, including Saturdays, to make sure that those inspections are done. As we've stated in previous meetings, we will not hold up closings or grand openings. If you have any issues, please reach out to me directly, and we can get those finals, roughs, whatever it may be, taken care of. We, again, are working around the clock to make sure that this is done. If you work in other cities, such as San Antonio or Austin, they are also having the same issues. Again, we like to say that we are ahead of the curve of those cities in promoting our extensive amount of work that our guys are doing. Plan review, we're actually caught up in plan review. Our plan review staff is almost full. Our turnaround times have dropped significantly since the late December, January range. Permit intake, again, we're getting up fully staffed, and that staff is helping us have that 24-hour turnaround compliance. And then again, our compliance inspector, Bo, is out there like a beast. He is putting a lot of people on notice and getting a lot of people in compliance. So he's doing a great job of helping the inspection team out on particular built environment issues. Again, he works across all the different trades to try to help us move the city forward. Again, was talked about earlier, IB8 and IB10 will be launching here pretty quick. IB8 is the drainage requirement for projects, infill. We've discussed this a few times. We had pushed it out to June 1st. Primarily, this just talks about how your permit will be in the built environment. We're asking for a basic drainage plan up front as already in the code, and then particular builds may require a post-engineered or surveyed plan just to make sure that that drainage is flowing to that improved source. ID10 we talked about as well. This is the engineered wood products information bulletin. Again, we'll be launching that June 1st, just requiring specs and some items to be addressed on engineered wood products. I'm sorry, this is Mike Dice. I just saw a note. I thought I'd introduce myself. I apologize. And then addendums. So when we've got construction in the field and things have changed, either a wall is moved or we have seen additions. We've seen a number of things happen from the approved plans. All we ask is if changes that are done in the field, just submit those plans to us so we can approve the addendums. As you know, any changes in the field could affect the approved plans that we had reviewed. We just want to make sure that those are done. And again, we are at a quick turnaround time for those addendums. Just make sure that you get things sent to us if there are changes in the field. And finally, the new N4 upgrade we have been talking about for a while was recently approved by council. We are currently in discussions with IT, those preliminary discussions as we prepare for the vendor to be engaged. Again, this will take the development services to a new level of online and permitting service. We will be in the first tranche, as it were, of launching. So we'll be the first or second department
Yes.
launched, I think, after finance.
Yes.
But this will improve your online options with our current portal, as you know, it will go away. A new portal called Rhythm will come into play. This will allow you to submit everything through one portal touch. You don't have to go to multiple areas or emails or send stuff here, send stuff there. This will limit the amount of touches that you have to do to get your project in and complete. You'll be able to submit plans, do applications, make payments, schedule inspections, view status. It's a great tool and it's coming. DigiPlan is another component that will be our electronic plan review. Again, it will allow us to review and transfer plans back and forth through the DigiPlan application. Again, speeding up that plan review and even lowering our turnaround times than we currently have. So that's coming. We've begun that engagement. Again, we hope to launch sometime in 2022, 23. It depends on where we're at, but they seem to be pretty confident that we can get this going pretty quickly. Any questions on any of the building division items?
Very good. You did a great job. Thank you, Michael. Al Raymond, Director of Development Services. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, one quick question. With this new software, I noticed inspectors are getting iPhones, which is great, because you'll be able to do more, see more. But with like this new software, are we looking at that whole plans not being on site anymore because you'll be able to pull up your approved set of plans with the software and the permit? Is that hopefully something that's happening?
It's something we're looking at, Moses, but keep in mind until we get the network, redundancy and stability throughout the city, that is just a goal that we're trying to achieve, right? So once AT&T and Grande and whoever finishes kind of shoring up the connectivity of the city, perhaps that is something we can move to. But initially, it's not part of this, but eventually it will be.
Yeah, this is Mike Dice. With the new software and then the hardware components that the inspectors will have, the tablets that we're moving to, they'll be able to have connectivity, again, based on what Al said, based on rollout of some new things that are going on in the city. We look to have a blanket of connectivity across the city. Obviously, there may be a dead spot or two, as you all know, on some of your phone calls. But we're looking to go completely paperless. So that is an option. But right now, it'll still remain. But yeah, it's ultimately a goal to where we're completely paperless.
Right.
And one last question. So I know there was obviously we've all been kind of in weed mode with inspections because of staff, COVID, virtual, this, that, the other, right? So moving forward with this new technology, will the city look at a virtual inspection considering, you know, we're probably going to have more homes built, more commercial, the boom, the, you know, and then just as or is that like a backup option if you back up a certain amount of days? Because, you know, Corpus is used to next day inspections, right? We've all had to adjust this 12 months / 3 months, but getting back to that type of system. And then also we're not getting phone calls or any type of heads up. I think that, you know, kind of expired, which is fine. But, you know, I think again, if the community is informed the same way they were informed that we would, uninformed, or that way we all understand what we're dealing with moving forward. But hopefully you guys with the technology system are looking at doing things where some things can now be picture related as they've been with the virtual aspect, but maybe more with the emails or an upload system where, you know, it's one minor item, you know, things like that that we've all talked about, but just throwing that out there. Thank you.
Yeah, Moses, this is Mike again. So yeah, I mean, that ultimately, you know, paperless is one goal, more virtual inspections is another. Nothing takes the place of a trained professional's eyes on the site, so we will still continue to have some inspections, but
Yeah,
the success, the success that we had with the virtual through COVID, we definitely want to carry through, and you can still request virtual if you prefer. On some of the items, we have that ID that was published, I don't remember the number, 4. And again, we can send that back out again. Those items are still available for virtual if you prefer. Again, moving in the future with the new system, as I've said in other meetings, the system's going to give us route optimization for inspectors to make their daily route more efficient. It'll have the ability to video conference. They can take photos with their tablets, immediately upload and send those pictures to whoever may be the required trade professional. So we're moving in that system. We're moving from a kind of an antiquated manual system that we have now to a better system. Again, I'll say some cities have, but I think this system, based on what we've seen and how it's going to update, will be better than the San Antonio's and Austin's, because we really do put a whole lot of we're putting a lot of effort into this to make sure that this thing works. And if it's better for you guys, not only home builders, but commercial builders, we want that to get out. We want everybody to know, hey, it's real easy to submit plans and do inspections in Corpus, and that news travels fast. So again, we've said it jokingly 1,000 times. You guys develop, we're employed. So we want to make sure that you guys develop as easy as possible.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, on to the director's report. This is Al Raymond, Director of Development Services. April revenues and expenses. We'll bring this up here in 1 second. That's okay. It's that day. Up top left.
Yeah. Sorry, it's this. I just need to get. There you go.
Okay. As you see, we had budgeted. We had anticipated we'd be around $3.6 million as of last week. We really had revenues of 2.4, which is incredibly good. But as you see, our expenses are in north of $6 million, and that is because, development services encumbered the $2+ million for the master planning and impact fee study. And we encumbered monies for the renovation of this building, right? We are still, even though I haven't talked about it in a while, we're still renovating this building, this 2406 Leopard, right? We will own this building as of June 1st. So we're going to remove the Frostbank sign, and there'll be a sign up that says City of Corpus Christi with our emblem or logo, right, on 2 sides of the building. So we're excited about that, and we're excited about the overall upgrade. So so even though the expenditures are kind of way out there, it's not that we're spending all willy-nilly. It's that there are just some specific high dollar things that have happened. But surprisingly enough, as you can see, the permitting is trending north of what we projected. So, which means that they're still building and development here in Corpus, and we want to facilitate that as much as possible. Okay, announcements. I wanted to share something with the group, and I know we're a little over an hour here, but I wanted to say last month in April, in the year and a half I've been here, I've never received so many complaints that I did last month in April, right? And not that the complaints went, say, to me or to Michael or to Nina, they actually went to Peter at the 5th floor. And it was an interesting month, right? Because everyone had some issue or something to complain about, right? So I thought to myself, well, we try to reach out to the development community as we do now, right? We even have a standing meeting, I think, with the Coastal Bend Home Builders Association once a month or so, right? We're going to initiate our meetings on the 2021 code adoption process starting this month as well. But I realized something else, and just trying to get out and touch and reach everyone is somewhat challenging. But I wanted to make this statement, right? If any of you, for any reason, want to engage, or you have an issue and you just say, you don't have to wait for our standing, second Friday of every month. You don't have to wait for our meeting with the Coastal Bend Home Builders Association, whoever you are. You can just reach out to Michael and Nina or myself, and we'll engage you at any time for any issue at any level, right? Whether you want us to come meet you or you want to come here, since we do allow people now behind the counter, if you will. So reach out to us, right? If you want to engage, we're here to engage with you. We try to over communicate, right? We have a newsletter, as you know, and other things. We try to be very active on our social media accounts, although we don't have a lot of followers, but we're going to change that real soon. But even beyond that, if you want to engage, just email or reach out to Michael, Nina, or myself, and we'll do that. Because as I said, I want to make sure that we can facilitate you in doing whatever you want to do, and make sure you spread that to your friends, right? Other people, because we want to make sure that we over communicate, over engage, so that we are all kind of on the same page. Okay, DSC performance in April. Michael kind of alluded to it. We've kind of turned a corner, right? We're getting bodies here. We're getting people. We're getting really qualified people, right? Those who are certified and who have experience and license, so that we can kind of turn the corner in terms of our production and our service delivery to the community, right? So in the month of April, 514 plan applications were submitted, right? Residential, of that 514, 409 were residential, which is huge, right? That tells you that there's still kind of a driving economy there, even though prices are high and those kinds of things, right? Of that 419, our average, that 409, our average review time was 2.9, right? And our goal is 3 days, so 2.9 days. So we're right there, and we're maintaining that, and we're really excited that we're finally getting to see numbers that we can actually maintain. The total commercial plans submitted were 105, and our average review time for that was 7.76, right? Our goal is 10 days, but we're cutting at 7.76, or really 8. So that's great too, right? Total permits submitted in the month of April were 1,929. Total permits issued 1,786. Of the trade permits, you see there was 1,327. Total issued of the trades permits, 1,259. Not bad. I went to Andrew and said, really, we only had 3 zoning applications in the month of April, and he corrected me and said only 3 complete zoning applications, so that's good. But that's on an uptake, and Andrew shared that with me too. Total number of plat applications submitted, 20. Plat applications accepted, 10. Plat applications approved by Planning Commission, 1, right? Total public improvements in the month of April that were submitted, 10. An average review time was 25 days, and our goal, of course, is 25 days. So we're at that, but we're giving Brett some more forces, right? Brett has one engineer technician working under him. We are posting, if we not already have, we're posting for an engineer 4, right? Just trying to improve and raise the level of our professionalism here in development services. So we'll be excited when we bring that person on. For inspections, the total number of inspections that were scheduled in the month of April were 3,900. Total number of inspections resulted 4159. And as you see there at the very bottom, we tried to maintain 85% for next day. Moses mentioned that next day, and we're at 81%. If you remember, the last month we were in kind of the low 70s. So we're gradually getting to a level of performance that I think we want to achieve and even go above and beyond that and improve that. So things are looking up, and things are looking up, and it'll be an interesting spring and summer this year. So with that, I entertain any questions. Are there any additional questions or anything you want to share or anything at all? Okay, well, thank you very much. Have a great Friday and have a wonderful, wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next month. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.